Okay. I don't see anybody on there yet, but you never know. Or some people just might listen to the recording. Okay, we were talking about. Yeah, they keep on rearranging everything. What's this? Oh, oh. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but I just gave her an extra sheet. Do you need one? That's all right. I have extra. It's all right here. No. I'll give it back. All right, fine. All right. So we were in the middle actually talking about Moses Mendelssohn, but I did a little bit more research about him, so I have a little more info. You know that the stars are invisible. Oh, I know. Right. Yes, yes. They haven't decided which way they're going. Absolutely. All right. Here, so let me just give you this. And I'll give you a little bit more intro. Okay, first of all, the daytime. Okay, I didn't have a chance to look it up. Would you have liked to watch two kids for 8 days? They're not little, but one's 11, while the other's 15. But they're wonderful. And everything I wanted to do with my grandson told me, no, you can't do that. Mommy doesn't let. Yes, I said, but you're in my house and I'll make sure don't ask the whole 8 days. I mean, he was more than willing to, it's going to take him to a movie. It's PG. PG. No, my other son went to see it. He said it was fine. It was fine. Then I wanted to watch some TV. Mommy doesn't let. It was good. And you feel, God bless him. He could. And how do I raise him? He watched the TV. He went to the movies. Yeah, exactly. Well, but I mean, here they want to come with their parents and the parents. Yeah, I just don't have the energy to schluff them over them. Even went to the library. Oh, you can only take out certain. We can only take out certain books. In the children's section. That's. I don't know if you have any of your brains like this, but whatever. Yeah. No, I can understand not the TV because it could be some waste of time, but but I wasn't putting on a show. I was putting on Joe likes it's kind of interesting. I have these two guys. I mean, it's real who go it's called pickers. They go around. Oh, yeah, yeah, and there's nothing. It's perfectly clean. Yeah, they're antiquers, and they go all over the U.S. looking for these really interesting Americana things. And she was literally standing in front of him, so he could. I'm thinking that you have those people all the aim that also applies to grandparents. Yeah. No. I mean, doesn't let. So, any case, that's the other side. Not that's the way I raise my kids, and all my kids are from, and it's yeah. And listen, I grew up in a house. We had a TV when I was growing up. Could be, I don't know. Anyway, back to Moses Mendelssohn, who was a very forward thinker for his time period. Yes, this is Germany. I was going to bring Max. Virtual Hashem, I'll be able to take care of everything next week. I really had no time to breathe, and I just collapsed at the end of every day. They left yesterday. So now I've been doing the laundry. Okay, we're doing Mendelssohn. We're finishing up Moses Mendelssohn. And so you still have your sheets. Otherwise, I do have some extra sheets on Mendelssohn if anybody wants. Yes, have to be a little funnier today. All right. Um, he grew up in a from home. And he himself was always a religious Jew. It just that he was more forward thinking for his time period, and so arose a lot of controversy arose as a result. The interesting thing, I wrote this here at the top. He's this is the 18th century, so he's in the same time period as the Baal Shem Tov and as the Vilna Gaon. So it's like all these people, you know, uh, but the earlier two are from Eastern Europe, and he's Eastern Europe. Again, this is the period of enlightenment, and people are it's almost like an awakening, from you know the time period of the medieval time period when things were so constrained. And now there's sort of like an opening up of society or a questioning. It's not quite open yet. That'll be more into the 19th century, but it's starting now in this 18th century. So again, it's called the Age of Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. Each individual can think, independently, and it's also it's not the Jewish part. Well, it will be the Jewish part ultimately, but it's anti-church and it's anti-monarchy. Okay, that each individual stands on his own to make up his own decision how he wants to conduct his lives, and nobody else should tell him to do. Okay, so he eventually born in this town called Dessau, but he eventually goes to Berlin. I found out a few interesting things here. He knew many, many languages. I think that was why he was so keen on encouraging people to study German, the vernacular language of the country. And if you want to become a part of the people there, you have to speak, that language. But he himself knew he had learned Latin and Greek. He knew English, French, Italian, and obviously German and Hebrew. So yeah, he was a very brilliant man. It seems to me that never talks about how let's say he went to a university. So I guess he learns all these things on his own. He's a very brilliant, obviously his Judaica learning was through a Pater or the Rebbe, but his secular learning, and he must have done this, on his own. Yeah, I told you the one thing about him was that he was hunchback. I looked in Encyclopedia Judaica, which is very scholarly work, because I questioned. They say because he was ill, that's why he became hunchback. I'd never heard of such a thing. Maybe it's cystic fibrosis. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why they think that the illness caused, it's, usually you're born with this, or you have scoliosis, you have a curvature of the spine. You'll see though, he one of his children though, his youngest daughter must have had the same thing. So I don't know if that's a hereditary type of condition. That's true because I'm a bit round shouldered. My mom certainly was. So yeah, so I guess. He actually was granted permission in 1763 to reside in Berlin. Remember, I told you always had to have permission, the ruling authorities, as a Jew, if you wanted to live in a certain location. So he did, but Encyclopedia Judaica made it sound like he never had official permission. Every source looking tells you something slightly different. He got married in 1762. He had 6 children. He had 4 boys and 2 girls. And it was that youngest daughter one thing. She also had that hunchback. This is so interesting. His daughter's name, his wife's name was Froma, and she was the great granddaughter of Samuel Oppenheimer. Remember we learned about him? He was that court Jew in Vienna. So how interesting, through the generations, he made that link. Because I'm trying to think, like, how did he earn an income? I mean, he came from a very poor family. Remember, they said if he had a loaf of bread, it had to last him for the entire week. He married into the Oppenheimer family, so there was certainly were funds there. And you know, he loved the study of philosophy, and then he became very good friends with this man, Gotthold Lessing, not a non-Jew, and that's how he, who in turn introduced him. That so he was in a circle of the intelligentsia of non-Jewish, you know, German intellectuals, um, and Lessing and them, you know, viewed the Jews in a favorable light, and he actually had written this play, you know, called The Jews, and the main character is this fine individual. It actually was based on Mendelssohn himself. Um, just to go ahead a little bit, you know, I told you he had four sons. We'll tell you what happens with them, even the daughters. But and his grandson is Felix Mendelssohn. Perhaps I think I used to play some of his pieces on the piano. So very beautiful music. And he had a sister whose name was Annie, who also was very musically inclined, and probably that woman, she probably would have been yeah, they were great, good friends. They were both born within a few years of each other. Yeah, ironic thing is they both died in the same year. They were young. They didn't live a very long life. But he did create very beautiful music. Um, okay, this is on page 2, just to look. Okay, yes, we have that fade on. I didn't have a chance to look up to see what. Okay, what's it mean? Oh, giver of life. It's based, right? But it's based. This work that he wrote, this philosophic work, it's based on Plato's Phaedon. Okay, it's called Giver of Life. Oh, it's actually a name. Oh, interesting. Okay. That came out in 1767. So he was very prolific already in the 1760s, you know, into the 1770s. And then so he feels, you know, he's a very well-educated man who spoke a beautiful German, and he is welcome into these German intelligentsia circles. So he tries to devise a way. He sees his other fellow Jews, and that, you know, there's still the ghettos, there's Yiddish, and he wants to somehow break that mold and bring them more into the modern world, and so they will become more acceptable to the German, you know, the general German, obviously Christian, you know, society. So we came up, I told you, with several, which if we look at that film now in our modern age, right? And we would think these are good things. Think of art school. So, but in those days, you know, it was a great stress on studying everything, you know, in Hebrew or Aramaic, you know, and the people themselves, the jargon that they spoke was Yiddish, you know, but they spoke to one another. So the first thing he thought, well, how can he get them to be more comfortable in the German language? You know, of course, they were living in Germany. So he translates the Torah into German, but he used it with Hebrew letters because obviously these, you know, there weren't public schools in those days. You know, they weren't going any place. Or if they did, they went to like a cheder where they're learning the Jewish subject. They're not learning general subject, but he wants them to be more accepted again into the overall German society. Well, for that, you need to have this language. It's true, right? If you want to be able to communicate with somebody wherever you might go, you need a common language. And the common language there, of course, is Germany. And remember, some Viennese Jews had moved also into Germany, and Austria is also a German-speaking country. So that this is his initial thing that he does, and this was also, as I say, treated, I would say, by the Orthodox community at the time as a terrible thing that he was doing, because this could lead then to Jews leaving the fold. And of course, it did at a certain level, because by now being able to speak a very beautiful, pure German, they wanted more and more to be part of German Christian society. Okay. But as I say, when I think about it now, they look how many things are translated into English, and we think there's nothing wrong with that, and it just helps us to understand the basic text. Yes. Mm. Probably they were probably so leery of being anything that would entice, right, the Jewish people away from their normative lifestyle. That I mean, and look what we'll see what's going to happen to Mendelssohn's own immediate family. So, right, looking at this, I think, oh well, look what happened. But yeah, let's just remember he himself was a totally observant Jew. He did believe that Torah means Sinai, right, which later, like the Reform movement. And who was somebody made a comment that some people think of him as the father of the Reform movement. He was not the father of the Reform movement, but a lot of the ideas in the Reform movement, they're going to come after Mendelssohn, right? So that's what people interpreted that. I told you he actually even wrote. He also believed, obviously, that one should have good knowledge of pure Hebrew. Again, he didn't like Yiddish because Yiddish is this mixture of German and Hebrew. So learn the language in its original cast, and learn German as German, and then learn. If you want to study Hebrew, not I mean, later on, certainly in Eastern Europe, the Yiddish that was used or became in more into the 19th century became a very cultural language, and some of the things we know from there, they were originally written, I told you, in Yiddish, then they were translated to Hebrew and or into other languages, into English. He even thought up of the idea of having a school for Jewish children that would be taught in German. All right. Not, it would be teaching the same Jewish subjects that you might have found, let's say, in the Cheder, but you would not be speaking Yiddish, right? And the language one would talk to one another would be in German. Okay. Okay. So look at page 3. I'll just read those past on page 3. That's where I think where we had left, but we'll take it from there. The many Jews of that day believed that Mendelssohn was destroying Judaism. They were particularly angry about the translation of the Torah. They feared that the knowledge of German would lead the youth of Israel away from their Jewish studies. Did this happen? I mean, yeah, yeah. It was just this terrible. I mean, we speak English. We're in America. We're very much part of American society. Doesn't sway us, But in those times, it was so radical, so people wanted to take it to the extreme. Well, let's be like really like the other, not just the language, but they will accept their things. And a lot of people ended up. Well, you'll see how they're going to change Judaism, and some are going to leave the fold combination. Translation was actually put under a harem. I guess if you're in the Orthodox community at that time, they didn't want you to get a copy. It was called the Beat-Or, which means little air to explain. He also had written a commentary on the Chumash in German. But he really does, I told you, he personally himself, he was just, I think in a way, he wanted to open up the eyes of the Jews of Germany, make them more part of society, would be then more acceptable. And then as a result, the Germans will grant them equal rights. Because at this point, of course, there are no equal rights. So he wrote a book, actually, it's called Jerusalem, and it talks about, this work called the civil emancipation of, he's trying to explain to Ben his viewpoint. People don't have to be so afraid of him. You don't need to put a hammer on me. I'm just trying to help, the vast majority of Jews who are, again, living in this ghetto society, speaking, Yiddish, and they're not at all part of Germany. If you want the Germans to treat you, on an equal basis, you have to learn the native language. Okay. So I'll read that next paragraph. It says, Mendelssohn criticized the contemporary organization of Jewish life. He claimed the rabbis had too much power. Well, sure, because they put him into Tehran, so he was opposed to them. He did, he felt one should still be observing the mitzvah. He wasn't against the religion, the practice of the religion. But I guess he's feeling that the leaders, the Rabbanim, them states, that they're living in an old-fashioned sort of way, and trying to bring everybody into the modern age. He was a firm believer in the freedom of conscience, like that every person can think for themselves. You don't have some telling you what to do, like Tova Deducha, but everybody can decide for themselves how they're going to, conduct their life. I mean, this can be dangerous. I mean, it's a positive, you think for yourself, of course, but you have to be an educated person to know from where you stand. But it also could be somebody who says, hey, I think this is all nonsense, and chuck it all. And he says nobody can impose their thought processes upon another individual. And I like this in the middle of the paragraph. It was just as wrong for a Jewish community to punish a Jew for his refusal to obey Jewish tradition as it was for the civil government to refuse to grant civil rights to the Jews because they did not obey Christian tradition, right? Because when we talk then about the general government, it is a Christian, government. And they ridiculed the Jews, practices, and it was a combination. But it strictly was anti-Semitism. So it really doesn't matter what your religion, what your beliefs are. It's just, as we know, up until the very day. Whose phone is that? It keeps on ringing. Yeah, turn it. Can you please turn it back off? Okay, silence it. Thank you. Okay. Again, to be part of society, you have to join in. You have to be speaking that same language. You could personally in your own home, practice your religion as you so wish. But when you're out in general society, you need to blend in. Now, look at the next to the last paragraph. Okay. While trying to break down the ghetto wall, Mendelssohn also tried to convince the Christians to break it down from their side. Does that work? No. So even though I told you, he's very welcome into this Christian world of the intelligentsia, not ultimately the church is not invited, but this group of philosophers, that he associates with, he's more than welcome to be part of them. Lessing now writes another very famous play. It's called Nathan the Wise. And again, obviously, he's using Mendelssohn as his role model, for this play. And there were certainly people in that other circle, the German circle, who, did feel like he was really an anomaly. He was really very different from the general Jewish population, but they felt if they could produce a brilliant man like this, well, there must be other people out there of like thought, and that maybe we should then be more accepting of them. So by being more accepting, then you hope that individual will then learn the same thought processes, and and then could be part of your social group. Again, this is a very small minority of Germans who are thinking like Christian German. There's another person here. His name is Christian Wilhelm Dohm. He was a Prussian office holder, an aristocrat, and Mendelssohn convinces him that he should write a work about Jewish civil emancipation. To treat us like part of society, we're entitled to the same rights as any other citizen living in the country. I'm on the page. Okay. And so Dohm wrote about how the Jews had been treated. And that's why, maybe people were criticizing them. On the other hand, if you exclude them from society and they're living behind the ghetto wall, how do you expect them ever to become part of society? You're forcing this. They were only engaged in certain occupations. They're always accused of usury, charging interest, but you didn't allow them to engage in any other occupation. So what were they supposed to do? Everybody has to earn an income. But if you would only grant them equal rights and that they could, be right and become part, right, as you said, of general society, then you would see what great contributions, just like Mendelssohn would can contribute to the German world. But of course, the liberals had very little influence in those days. And here it says this, even though I told you Winslow said he was able to live in Berlin, that Frederick, who was emperor, or the head, but the head of Prussia, had given him permission. But here it says also he couldn't obtain the right to live as a free man. This must be accurate because I looked at Encyclopedia Judaica, which is certainly by great scholars, and I'm sure I didn't see who actually wrote the article on Mendelssohn, but these are people who really know. Where I saw that one source, I don't know if that was totally true, or maybe at a certain point he himself did obtain the right, but he isn't telling you that he never did. He never really obtained the right to live as an equal among the other Jews. He died in 1786. Just as things are starting now to change in German society. Differently than in Eastern Europe, but now Central Europe, things are beginning to change. And we'll see. We're going to look into some other Western European countries and see what's going to be changing here also. Of course, the Orthodox circles, I told you, they look upon him, that he helped to destroy the fabric of Orthodoxy. But this idea, what he was trying to do, I think he meant well. He meant well that he wanted the Jews again to get out of the ghetto. If you learn the language, you'll become more part, of the people, and eventually the walls will be broken down and totally freely to mingle, and you'll be granted equal rights. Okay. But now what's going to happen is the Jews, are going to say, good idea. And they're going to want to run full force, to be accepted into the non-Jewish world. And we'll see what happened to them. So ultimately what happened with children, all of them, even those girls, they convert to Christianity. Most, I think, became Protestant. Some actually became Catholic. And really, never. And his grandchildren would have been baptized, into the church. But didn't Felix, right, this famous composer, he always identified himself as a Jew. His father had wanted him to change his last name, the Mendelssohn, sounding, and he refused. And not that he practiced Judaism, but he was very proud of his origin and his background, and he would not, I don't know what happened eventually to the rest of the family. I don't know, some came back to the fold. I honestly don't know, but so that's why he's so highly because if his idea ideas, which he meant well with, but look what happened to his children, you know, and that his, and his grandchildren, that were baptized, what kind of a man is this? Why should we follow anything that he says? Because this will be the end result. I mean, it will take a while. We'll go into the 19th century where Orthodoxy will come back with some counter arguments, but the reform movement is going to grow, and it's going to appeal. And then it's going to lead even Germany to be, but when you think, by the way, conservative movement is an American creation, right? But in Europe, you have either Orthodox or you have Reform. That's it. And in Israel now, the fact that they have this like Masoretim congregation, that's because of the conservatives, which are the majority, here in America. Well, they used to be true anymore, but they went into introduce that form of Jewish worship. They're very much opposed. Like they would have agreed with Mendelssohn that the rabbi would they have control over everything, and they could tell us all how to what you can eat, what you can do, and very much opposed to that idea. So they're actually a little thing. All right. The next one I'm going to do, I created a. Thank God I created. Oh my grandchildren. I don't know if you have it yet. So Jews in the 18th century liberalism. You all need a copy of it. Okay. This one you want the Mendelssohn back? Okay. All right. Anybody? Oh, you wait for mine? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So now we'll learn a little bit more about what's going on in the rest of Europe, Western Europe. We're not talking about Eastern Europe really at all now. We're just going to concentrate on Western Europe. All right, do you all have it? It's called Jews. Okay. Okay, these are extras. Okay. I never know from time to time who's coming, who's not coming. So it's a little. All right. Yes, sure. Well, I would say that right you I mean I still feel this. I am obviously an Orthodox Jew, observe the mitzvot, but I am part of American society. I do speak English, that is my native tongue. So I can converse with anybody, here. And I don't believe that you have to be afraid of knowledge, you know. I don't believe in censorship. First of all, my profession is a librarian. So I'm very much opposed to banning books. I think that's horrible, And I never censored. I told you what my kids could watch or see, And that's why I read things when I was younger that maybe considered to be inappropriate. Okay. But didn't affect me. I mean, it's such a strong core of Yahadut, and if anything, reading something or a lifestyle that, I wouldn't personally approve of. There are people like that out there. There are people who do behave in a certain way. But if anything, I look askance at that and I think, oh, how beautiful though is my own observance, of Judaism. That I have no interest in following that path. I might read about it and know that there are people like that have to, influence me or change me. So it's just a different way. So I grew up in a rabbinic home. My father was the Orthodox Rav of the community. I don't remember my parents ever censoring us. We could do this or could do that. And I grew up in a small town, and all of my siblings were all from, we didn't go, and all my children, thank God, they're also, from. I mean, you do know families, kids who go off as they say, but obviously some of the way my parents raised us, or the way I raised my own children, of course, it depends on the spouse they marry, and but my kids themselves, whatever, they're wonderful. I would say the two of them were more to them. I remember they used to come home from school and tell me things that I was doing wrong. I said, I just said, hey, you have your own house. You can do what you want. But in my house, this what's that? I told you they married Jews. Actually, they did marry Jews, but they converted again because they wanted to be so much part of Christian German society. They took it a step beyond. Right. His sons were actually were bankers, right? Oh, well, look at the Rothschilds. I mean, eventually, but they maintained their Jewishness. I mean, they didn't convert, to Christianity. Like Malcolm was saying, everybody can decide for themselves how they're going to live their lives. Obviously, he himself was put into hell, so he came out and how he felt about it. You can't tell me how I want to think. In my head, I am an independent person. And he was very scholarly and very knowledgeable. And he wasn't trying to dissuade people from practicing, their Judaism. He just wanted them to be more accepted into society, and then therefore the outside world would view them as people who definitely deserve equal rights to everybody else, in the country. And you have to understand, they're really not equal rights at that time, even in Germany. This is more to be accepted. Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think because the outside society would not let them in, so they turned even more inward. And if you're always living in an area that's surrounded by a wall, and in the medieval times, very often even the Christian priests or ministers, would actually come into the shuls and give sermons about, you should convert, I don't know. So they basically just ignored them, except here and there, obviously, you do learn about apostate, somebody who converts, outside Judaism. That's so. Now what's going on in the West of Western Europe? Okay, so we're talking about 18th century liberalism. Again, there is this opening in the minds of people through that 18th century. It starts in the 17th century. I'm talking about in the non-Jewish world, right? And now it's going to start blossoming, right? In the 18th century, and will reach fruition in the 19th century. And then look at the 20th century. But that's another story. Okay. So I'll read part of it and then comment. Says the liberal Christians who desire to have the Jews emancipated from the restrictions, included Tiger again, and we're talking about a very small minority of people who would consider themselves liberal, right, or open-minded in those days. The majority were not. There were three types. There were those who were we would call economic liberals, and they thought it economic advantage that the Jews should become a part of the give and take of the economy, allow them to engage in whatever trade they want, and we will treat them then as equals, and now we can grant them more freedom. There were those, of course, which we've already been learning. There were not them, no. The third one is what I'm talking about. There were also some who were actually political liberals, so actually they wanted that the laws should change and the Jews officially should become, part of general society. And then, of course, there are those intellectual liberals, which Mendelssohn became part of that group. And that's what you call the intelligence. And they saw that continuing this lifestyle, being confined into the ghetto, obviously having their own schools, only associated with one another on a social basis, that needs to be changed, and we need to welcome them to our general fold. But when we talk about the liberals, a very minute, a very tiny percent of the general popular. And these intelligentsia were even tiny of these. So some want them to be granted more rights to become more part of the economy. Some of them actually wanted that they should get political rights, just like any other, citizen. And some, on an intellectual level, wanted, to welcome in the Jews. But look at that second paragraph. The assumption, even among this liberal, they're Christian liberals, was that the Jews would have to transform them before emancipation could be granted to them. So Mendelssohn thinks, well, if you learn to speak the native language, this would be a way of transforming. But people are going to take it even beyond that, not just changing language. So such transformation could be anything learning to speak the language of the land in which they resided, all the way to his son, his daughters. You're giving up Judaism completely. Like if you want to be accepted, by the general Jewish world, well, you yourself have to be a Christian. Now, again, I don't know how much they actually believe, but it was a way to be accepted again by the general German population that if you became a Christian just like them, I mean, in their home, maybe they still continue Jewish practices. Look, Felix is the grandson. I mean, he's identifying himself, as a Jew. He's not hiding his Jewishness, but many people did, or they just stopped practicing. So it sort of makes me think of exactly the Anisim in Spain. Those especially those who opted to stay and not leave when the other Jews left Spain when they were expelled. They accepted all the Catholic precepts, and eventually it filtered down. But their grandchildren, they are Catholic. They are not Jews. That's why anybody who can prove, they still have to go through a conversion to be accepted back into the Jewish fold. Okay. I like this last sentence in that second paragraph. So we're talking about the general liberals. At best, the liberalism of that day was strongly tinged with smugness. At worst, was mixed with a strong dose of ignorance and prejudice. So, on a certain intellectual level, yes, we must accept these Jews interpolate. But change yourselves, become just like us, and then we will fully accept. Okay, what's going on in England? I'm trying to work with Shalom. He's coming. I can't believe it. After make over Shalom and actually his wife. Yeah, and Luke, they are coming in 10, 11 days or something. So I hope, that Shalom, if he feels he can, they can come and actually give a lecture here in person. He can tell you much more. And if not, we'll have to do it. No. I have to first get permission from him that he will be able to lecture. I first have to clear it, with him. I mean, he wasn't opposed to it. I did already discuss it with him, but when it comes down, maybe they're going to want to do something. So I don't know. I have to find out from him. And yeah, it's definitely his vacation. I mean, and London is very dreary. It's very overcast and raining, So I think my little grandson last year, and my pool will be fixed by then. So I can swim, take him to the beach. Actually, my daughter was down here also, not saying that, and so she's going to be a whole bunch of wonderful beach tours. She is a 5-year-old, so he's going to be wonderful. All right, let's do it again. So we have learned already that the Jews originally, they were expelled in the year 1290, but they do start filtering back, but secretly. They're not living openly, Jews. But when under Cromwell's reign, I don't know how much you know English history, there had been a king prior to Cromwell. His name was Charles the First, and he and Parliament did not get along whatsoever, and they eventually, right, they wouldn't get. So then Cromwell, who was the leader of the liberal faction, becomes the head of government, and it's during his time period that the question comes up, well, should we allow Jews to live here openly? And the case was brought by Portuguese Jews, and eventually it never became officially part of English law. But at that point, let them live here. They're contributing to society. They were very much engaged in commerce and trade, and so after that, and they could then openly practice it. That was the key thing. They might have been living there. So that's when Shalom Shul, this Bevis Mark synagogue, was founded. And I told you, should you ever have a chance to go to London, his building, it's building from, it was built in, the congregation was founded in the 1650s, but the building that you're in right now is from 17. Everything in there is authentic. When you sit on those benches, think for hundreds of years, Jews have been, sitting here and davening these gorgeous chandeliers that lit with candles. They have electric things on the.
A beautiful building.
Yeah. Well, it's the original. Everything there, So my little grandson was just 2. He's very curious. So he goes around underneath the men's benches. There are these like little storage things. So he discovers. He opens up them all. I don't remember what it was, but he actually showed my son. He had discovered something that dates back, And if you look in their Siddurim, they always have to pray for the king or the queen, So Shalom found one that was dedicated, to the king, to George the Third, who was during the American Revolution. And this is a prayer for him. So yeah. So yeah, so my son has to wear this beautiful robe. It's black, but it's got like navy blue running down, and he has a special shirt with a little tie. And yes, and he wears a tie. So when I came to visit them in London, I said to Shalom, I want to buy gifts for little Joe. Why don't you choose what you want? But then you'll say it's for me. So he ordered for him a little magician's top hat, and this kid was wearing it non-stop. So he comes to show, and then he would say to this little kid, like all the men in the choir, they wear their top hats. So Joe stands and he can sing all of Ein Eloheinu now. He knows it, he speaks beautifully, yeah, but the Ein Eloheinu is fairly much, like us. It's slightly different, but whatever. I do hope Shalom can come appear here in person. He's very personable. Outgoing. So we'll see. So let's just do a little bit here about England. All right. Again, so they started coming in, starting in 1650, were living outwardly. They were there, but this is the first time that they now have permission. It's not legally, doesn't become part of English law, but nobody there cares. Let these Jews come, they can have synagogues, etc. There was very little opposition to that. They were granted plenty of freedom, especially when it came to commerce, right? Okay. They were a certain life, they were different. Okay. The one thing is they could never become part of political life because you always had to take it. The oath was a Christian oath. So this won't be abolished. But right now, people are rough. Yeah. So it's going to happen later. Nathan. So they could never have a position in the government, because they would not take this oath. Interesting, he says politics was close to them, as was the opportunity to obtain a university degree. Obviously, no Jews were going to Oxford or Cambridge. They will eventually, but Not, this is 18th century. Um, but okay, this is interesting. By 17, some of the top of page 2. By 1753, now remember, the Jews first come living openly 1654. Now we're up, this is 100 years later, 1753. Those who guided the government of England, again, this is before the American Revolution, just to kind of put it into context historically, were ready to recognize the contribution of English Jewry to the commercial and financial stability of the country. Prime Minister Pelham had a bill passed by Parliament granting the Jews complete equality. He said, oh, what we do? Yeah, let's see. He soon discovered, remember, he was far ahead of his countrymen. Such a storm of objection was raised by the general populace purely on the grounds of religious prejudice. The law had to be repealed a few months. So here, some people did want to accept the Jews totally, but most did not, still did not. Another century passed before full emancipation was finally achieved. But it's not going to be into that mid-19th century that finally the Jews don't have to take that Christian oath anymore. And, well, we'll learn that as we go into the century. Okay, what's going on? And we'll just do Austria, and then I'll pause. Austria. In 1782, an edict of toleration was granted by Joseph II of Austria. The decree removed some of the restrictions on Jewish movements and occupation. At the same time, it insisted that the Jews reform their school system and their communal organization. Now, years later, 100 years, are going to do it. Well, he's not even going to grant them, but he's going to start education in Poland at this point, Russia. Okay. This was under the assumption that the Jews had to be civilized before they could be accepted into full right. So somehow, we're outside of society, they look down upon, strange practice. Actually, Sean, there's was a scholar, I think it's probably in the 18th century. His name was Pepys, P-E-P-Y-S. And he was describing, he had attended a service at Bevis Morris, and then he was writing about it. And he's writing about the carryings on that were going on. The show thinks it was probably Simchas Torah. And this, he's right, and he's like appalled about what's in the synagogue. Okay, so I guess we needed to be more civilized, right? Most of the Jews, and now we're talking about Austria, most of the Jews in the eastern provinces preferred to get along without the emperor favor. I mean, these are people more to be closer to Poland. Well, what the heck was the granting us right? They're not going to grant us right. We're going to still go on living our lives as we always have been. We're not going to give up our lifestyle so that you're going to accept us. We don't care. We don't want to be part of your life. But the Christian subjects obviously were also opposed, to this edict of toleration. So you said there are some forward-thinking people on very high levels, but the general population is not in favor. And you see here, even some Jews were opposed to it because we didn't want to have to change ourselves. We like the way we're living. We like the, living under the laws of the Torah. And we don't care that much about being part of your society. The edict of toleration was practically abandoned when Joseph died just a few years later. So, and then we know eventually, the Jews are expelled from Vienna. Obviously, Jews are going to move to Hungary, right? That's the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And Budapest will become, a good-sized Jewish community. But we'll continue next time. Where do we get to France? France really, and me, I have a little time to go through all my various folders to give you, I want to give you a map of France and a map of Germany. So you can see where a lot of these different, I think I have one also, because he's got a conversation right now, this country. Okay. Well, that's what I'm trying to decide, or as, um, you do what you, okay. Um, and Shalom, very knowledgeable. Shalom, how can you get interested in Spanish, Portuguese, Jewish community because he was hired by Shevet Israel, which is the oldest congregation in America, also a Spanish Portuguese congregation. And he knows a lot about those early Jews who came to settle in America. Even though it starts in the 17th century, it's also 18th. It's also 18th century. Um, so let me discuss with Shalom what he wants to talk about. Also, I'd love either I'll do it or he'll do it about how the Jews spread in the Caribbean. That is fascinating. I think that's really fascinating. So let me see. I think I'll try calling him. Let me just turn this off. Yeah, it's very, and he's been to all these places. He once, he was on this, that's how he got his job in Bevis North. He went on this quest to visit every Spanish Portuguese congregation in the world. So he had been, he's been to, wait, obviously been to Spain also, but he's been to France and Italy. And then he went to England. And he met this Rabbi Dweck, who's a Syrian Jew, but he's had a overall community. He said, we decided for years they didn't have a rabbi, and we're considering hiring somebody for that. Would you be interested? The rest. I'm sorry, what? No, he's a rabbi of the Catholic Bar Syndicate. Rabbi Dweck. Oh, the chief rabbi is an Ashkenazi. Right, a rabbi. Oh, no, on the shore, Shalom. Yeah, Shalom is there. You're but I don't know what we do. But my pleasure. So, all right. So I'll see what Shalom can do, and then I'll expand on it and give you more information. Oh, that's yeah.